At the end of the Second World War, the leaders of the victorious powers were gathered together in conference at Yalta and were dividing up the world among themselves. During the negotiations, Winston Churchill of Great Britain proposed a toast to his Soviet counterpart. He lifted his glass and said, "To Premier Stalin, whose foreign policies manifest a desire for peace." He turned away from the microphone and said, "A piece of Poland, a piece of Hungary, a piece of Romania." There are many ways people have regarded so-called peace in this world. Often the word peace is just a cover for greed or thirst for power and control. I remember when I was living behind the Iron Curtain, every year on the 1st of May, May Day, there would be huge parades through the streets of the Soviet-occupied capital, a parade of peace, it was cynically called. But that peace parade consisted in a procession of frightening tanks and guns and fighter planes meant to show off to the world the might of their armies. We who watched it just shook our heads in disbelief. That is peace? Jesus tells us, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. Not as the world gives, do I give it to you." We are all too familiar with how the world gives peace. We can't even find peace in our own families, or indeed in our own hearts. Only God can bestow on us true peace. At the beginning of World War I, the ambassador of Austria to the Holy See approached Pope Pius X with a request from the emperor to bless the guns and armies of Austria. The Pope became indignant, threw out the ambassador, and said, "I bless peace, not war." This is the peace that Jesus was talking about. Yet when will we ever see a world of such peace? Maybe Jimi Hendrix put it the best when he said, "When the power of love overcomes the love of power, the world will know peace." When will we finally see this? Perhaps the greatest discovery in the history of humankind was the discovery that the world is round. That truth was guessed by some of the ancient Greeks, was measured by the brilliant Muslim scholars of the 9th century, and was proved by Magellan. The world is round. This should make a huge difference in how we regard our world and all those who inhabit it. As Wayne Dyer, the modern spiritual author, has written, "When you live on a round planet, there is no choosing sides." Think about that. On a round planet, there are no sides. There is no up and down. It is all round. That is the key to peace. How many people fully realize that in their lives? On May 25th, 1986, there was a powerful yet all too partial realization of this. It was a movement called Hands Across America. On that day, for 15 minutes, 7 million people in this country joined hands together from the East Coast all the way to the West Coast. And for that quarter of an hour, they felt the power of the roundness of our world. They felt the power of that connectedness. They felt the power of that belonging. For 15 minutes, they ritualized, they sacramentalized our connectedness with one another in this world. That was all too brief, and that was all too small. We need to extend that human chain, not just from the East Coast to the West Coast of our own nation, but to span the entire globe, to realize that all of us are interconnected, to realize that all of us belong to one another. That is the only way peace will ever occur. All too many people, even in the modern world, live their lives as though the world were not round. Perhaps there was a reason why certain institutions were quick to reject the idea of a round world. A flat world with its sides, with its corners, and with its pieces works far more to their advantage, works far more in the interest of power and control. How many people do we have today who still choose sides when there are no sides in a round world? People who choose to identify themselves with a particular side and find their belonging, their sense of identity in their distinction from everyone else. They identify themselves perhaps with a particular tribe, with a particular culture, with a particular politics, with a particular religion, with a particular nationality. And they regard the people on the so-called other side, ludicrous phrase in a round world, as the enemy to be hated and perhaps even to be obliterated. When we seek our identity, our belonging, by emphasizing our differences, we will never find it. For our sense of identity, our true belonging, comes not in our separation, but rather in our connectedness. It is only when we consciously live in a round world that we discover our true identity and our true belonging. We don't have to create the connectedness. It's already there. We are all manifestations of the same universal Spirit of God, each in our own way. Even the great Albert Einstein said, "Our separation from one another is an optical illusion of consciousness." There are many alive today who are trying to dissolve that optical illusion and rediscover that wonderful connectedness, that wonderful belonging. Let us stop living as though the world were flat. Let us stop living in that flat world of corners to hide in and sides to choose and pieces to be divided and claimed for our own. Let us discover finally that the world is round, every part of it connected to every other part, every particle, every soul, every being, a unique manifestation of the whole. In a round world, there is no right and left, no higher and lower. There can be no center of the world on the surface of a globe. Mother Teresa once said, "If we have no peace today, it is because we have forgotten that we belong to each other. Every man, every woman, every child is my sister, my brother. And if all of us recognize the image of God in our neighbor, would there be any more need for tanks and generals?" Mother Teresa went on to say, "Let us not use guns and bombs to overcome the world. Let us use rather love and compassion. Peace begins with a smile." So she tells us 5 times a day, smile at someone you don't really feel like smiling at. Do it for peace. Let us radiate the peace of God and so light his light and extinguish in the world and in the hearts of all people all the hate and all the love of power. Such were the words of the great Mother Teresa, who did so much to transform this planet. Let us rediscover that the earth is round, that the world is one, that you and I belong to each other. We can choose a world of peace, or we can choose a world blown to pieces. There is no longer any third choice. Reach out your hand to your gun, if you will, and seek the peace as the world gives it. But I choose to reach out to something infinitely more powerful. I choose to reach out my hand to clasp yours in mine. Let us hold hands across the wide globe in an unbroken chain of humanity and grasp in those hands the awesome power of God.